How do we know when to drink it? Of course, all of this is brought together by the time change last night. As if you didn't know. You do know because you're here on time. If you didn't, you'd be joining us, I think, an hour later. Anyway, I'm not going to stop to figure that one out. This, I think, actually is a compass, not a clock. So perhaps I've lost my way. Oh well. I'm Natalie MacLean, nataliemaclean.com. I recommend and review and taste lots of wines, thousands of wines every year, and I'm here at your service. One of the key things that I always do when I'm recommending a wine is I indicate when you can drink the wine, even if it's immediately. And as my very clever commenters have already posted tonight, I'm going to refresh the comments here as I'm talking. Most wine is made to be consumed about, on average, 17 minutes from the time it hits the liquor store shelves, because that's the time on average it takes for us to drive home with the wine. So all to say in a facetious way that most wine these days, I'm talking 98% of wine, is meant to be consumed the year it was made or 2 years after at the most. Really, it's made to be enjoyed immediately, not on the drive home. So, excuse me, if you're just joining us, let me know where you're tuning in from, who's here tonight, what's in your glass. I'm starting to look forward to this every Sunday night at 6 p.m. We're here with the Sunday Sipper Club. As much as I would a stroll down to the pub on the corner. Of course, I don't have a pub on the corner. I live in the burbs. I would have to get in a car. That would not be a good idea. But I'm really enjoying this. So who's here? Please give me a hey. Let me know. Oh, here we go. Helena. Helena's here with her Diet Pepsi in her glass again. God bless you, Helena. Thank you for coming. Even if it's just you and me tonight, I'll do the drinking for you, my dear. So anyway, as I said at the beginning, we just do a little bit of regrouping here as people are refreshing their browser, joining us. We're talking about how wine ages. The metaphor, the wine, what happens. Tom is here. Hello, Tom. Welcome. And Tom, what's in your glass? Is it Diet Pepsi, like Helena? Sharon is here now. Yay, Sharon, with Poppy. Very nice, Sharon. Oh, hey, Anne, Mom, thank you. Commented on my video. I don't see the comment, but I see that you commented. So that's all right. That's very meta, isn't it? Tom says he's got Wolf Blass, Red Label, Australian Tawny. Is that a Tawny port? Port, I should put in quotes, because port is trademarked just like cheddar cheese is and champagne. Are you drinking a sticky, a so-called dessert wine from Australia? Tom. Dave is logging in with his Laughingstock portfolio. By the by, our wedding wine this summer. Congratulations, Dave. It augurs well for you, starting with Laughingstock. Anyway, if you don't take yourselves too seriously, you've got it made. Laughingstock is a great BC wine. Blend, I think, red blend, depending on which one you're drinking, Dave. Which one are you drinking, Dave? Patty and Paul are here, my favorites. I feel like I join them at dinner every Sunday night. They put their iPad or something, and my little talking head, I think, is sort of there with them. So, they're here from Virginia with a glass of Blindfold, a California White. Oh, by the Prisoner Wine Company. Now, the Prisoner Wine Company from California makes an amazing red that's pretty pricey but does age well. Interested in your comments, Patty and Paul from Virginia, on whether you think the white wine from Prisoner Wine Company would age well. While we're here and checking in, if you're just joining us, even if you're going to insist on lurking and not commenting, please do comment. Just tell me where you're from and what's in your glass. Hit the share button, and then you will let others know, your friends, to join us here. They can join the fun. It is more fun when there's more people here commenting or just watching and tasting along. Hit like. That will alert you next time we go live. Hit follow, hit sign up, hit everything. Just if you see a link, hit it. Okay? Anyway, we're talking about the impact of time on wine. As wine ages, what happens? When should we drink wines? James is here. Yay, James from Toronto, and he's drinking, with no G, the Cusimano Nero d'Avola. After all, he's making some pasta alla norma. Holy smokes, Dave, that's great. And Dave is back and saying it's the portfolio wine from Laughing Stock Vineyards in BC that he's drinking. Awesome. Lise, my gal Lise is here, and she's picked up some Ravenwood Zinfandel from last week. It's in her glass. That's a good thing you're not drinking from the bottle, Lise. Good gal. I'm glad we had some influence over you. And I want to know what you think. Last week we were talking about Ravenswood Zinfandel, and so we have influenced the shopping habits of at least one person, namely Lise. Okay, so let us get into our topic, because Lise and I believe Peter and Patty have posted questions on aging wine. Sharon from Ottawa is here. Yay! She's picked up a Ravenswood Zinfandel. Are you and Lise having wine together? Lise, remind me, too many brain cells destroyed. Where are you logging in from, my dear? Lise. And Lise, I think, are you in Toronto? So Sharon's here in Ottawa, and she's also got Ravenswood Zinfandel. So Sharon and Lise, you can compare notes on this wine based on last week's recommendation. Okay. Oh, Lise says it's okay, I'm not in love. Might need the right food, yes. Or just another glass of it, Lise. That can also increase your liking. She's drinking LOL in Sudbury, Ontario. That could be quite a drive for Sharon or for you, Lise. Sudbury and Ottawa. Think it's a little far, but oh well. So let's start off our topic with why we age wine. Why bother? So I've already said at the top of the show that most wine is made to be consumed the same year it's made, like the vintage date that's on the label, or maybe 2 years after. It's not really improving with age, because commercially that's what sells. That keeps the price down. It gets cash flow in the door for wineries, and they're not making the economic decisions in the production of wine that would lead to an elevated price and therefore ageability. That's a myth, actually. I shouldn't phrase it that way. Not all expensive wine doesn't need to be expensive to be aged, but it is one of the indicators, and we're going to talk about why that is. So, back to the question. Why would you want to age wine? Well, wine, unlike a lot of other beverages, orange juice, milk, even vodka, a lot of others, not so much whiskey, that benefits from age, either improves, depending on your opinion, because wine and taste is subjective, it either improves or at least changes and morphs into something that is different from what it was in its youth, if it has the ability to age well. So what happens? So what are we looking for when we are wanting to age a wine? So we're looking for something different from what it was in its youth. In its youth, most wines are grapey, fleshy, full-bodied. Think about, the primary fruit flavors. If you're thinking about red wines on the dark berry end of the spectrum, blackberry, dark raspberry, dark cherry. If you're thinking white wines, maybe it's more orchard fruit, peach, pear, whatever. So you get those primary fruit flavors, which we are trained to like as human beings. Our first taste sensory development is all about sweet on the tip of our tongue. So we're geared toward liking those fruit flavors. The sweetness tells us it's good for us, it's safe, it's not toxic. Evolution says, don't eat the poison icky berries. Eat the ones that taste sweet, give you nutrition. Those are the people who survive in the other caves. So we're trained for that. But we have evolved as human beings, just as wine will evolve with age. And so what are we looking for? When wine ages, it takes on what we call tertiary aromas. Tertiary, Tertiary. I shouldn't spell much further into this night, but third, right? So there's primary aromas, that's your fruit flavors. There's secondary aromas, someone's going to define that for me, and tertiary aromas. Now that's when we get into bottle bouquet. Tertiary means tanned leathers, violets, there's so much, cigar box, truffles. I don't mean the chocolates, I mean the fungi, wild, get out your pigs and dig for them truffles. Let me take a moment here. James has said, wine is like people. Okay, some mature and peak at an early age. Others may take more time to reach their peak. And if it gets too old, we get musty. LOL. Words of wisdom from James. Thank you, James. So true, so true. We all change with age, and so does wine. So when we're aging wine, the reason is that some wines will change, and we like that change. We like that it's no longer a primary fruit flavor. We're looking for something different because we're hedonists. Are we not? Can I have a high five? And amen, we're hedonists. We want something different to lift us out of the ordinary experience of drinking wine young and just tasting the first fruits, if you will, of the harvest. Lee says, Sharon, wondering what you think of the Zin. Oh, they're having a private, no, not a private conversation, they're posting live here. P.S. My sister-in-law is from Ottawa, so we are there often. Here's me getting distracted. Squirrel. For me, this wine is medium-bodied, has some light cherry and a bit of spice. It tastes young, ? She wants Sharon's opinion. Nice aftertaste. That would be Finnish, Lise. Can we just, let's give you some language here. No worries. We don't need to be snobby, but we often say Finnish instead of aftertaste. It's not smooth, but it's good. And I would serve this to my friends who are not fussy, like me. Yes. Give it to your friends who are not fussy, please. Francis! Hey, Francis is logging in from Quebec. And Francis is the sommelier, and probably much more, at the La Forge restaurant in Tremblant, the ski town in Quebec. So, Francis knows his stuff. Say hello to Francis. He is joining us for the first time tonight. Welcome, Francis. Francis, what are you drinking? Please let us know. Anne. Hello, Anne. That's my mom. Love you so much. From Halifax with her medicinal sake. Great to hear from you. Good to hear from you too, Mom. My mom is drinking sake every night because I think it's good for digestion, right, Mom? Please share the medical benefits that you've been reading about because I really respect the research you do. It's really awesome. Malcolm's here from Niagara. Malcolm is a product consultant with a well-known liquor store chain here in Ontario. And Malcolm super knows his stuff. He's a sommelier and trained at Algonquin College and is now in Niagara and really adds a lot to our discussion every Sunday, I mean. Dave has said he's recently opened a 2008 Foreign Affair Chardonnay. Absolutely brilliant. Canadian wines are aging well. You know, Dave, you bring up an interesting wine because Foreign Affair, if you probably know, uses the appassamento method. The appassamento method is a traditional Venetian, northern Italian method of adding ageability to wine. So what they do is they dry the grapes on straw mats in an airy room with great accents. I mean, the people who are doing this, and beautiful clothing, I'm sure. Anyway, what the dry grapes do is they add heft, they add alcohol, they add weight, they add body. So I'm wondering, Dave, if that Foreign Affair Chardonnay, if it says on the back of the bottle or anywhere on it that it has gone through the appassamento method. Maybe not, because it's a white wine, maybe they're trying for freshness. But I'm just wondering, because Foreign Affair is known for using the appassamento method, I think, on just about every red wine it produces. And Malcolm, correct me if I'm wrong, but it now offers the most expensive wine in the LCBO, I believe. They're clocking in at about, I don't know, was it 150, 170 for something? Remind me of the label name. But they just came out with it. It was like, whoa, let's raise the bar, at least price-wise, right? So Anyway, what I'm drinking here, I have to interrupt myself because I will just get thirsty. Can I just show you all the wines I have to show you tonight and talk about? I've got to get through all of these, but just take a look. Look at this. Oh, okay, so I'm not known for my camera method, but that's a lot of wine. Anyway, I'm just small sips. And some of them I pre-tasted. You know, I need to vet these things for you. So there's always a delay on the camera so I can see my shaky camera. Anyway, Blair Witch Project, Wine Witch Project. So anyway, Francois, you're not Francis, you're Francois, right? Okay, tell me what's in your glass, Francois. Malcolm, he has the definition of secondary aromas. They're wine-making aromas. Oak, malolactic fermentation. Malolactic is when it goes from the hard acids and there's a secondary fermentation that converts them into softer acids. Lactic acid is like what you would find in milk, so not a harsh acid, but it goes through that secondary fermentation and changes those primary acids into softer ones. All right, so Anne in Halifax says 1 ounce of sake helps me enjoy better quality sleep. That's interesting. I would love to know, I actually would love to know more. I want to know more. Francois, miam miam, miam miam. Okay, I think that means I'm on the right track. I'm just going to say that. Patty, we had, this is Patty and Paul. We had a friend who will often bring a bottle of wine that is about 50 years old. The purple of the grape has turned brown in the light. Yes, some are good, while some have turned harsh and sherry-like. So many good points in there, Patty and Paul. So, as wine ages, we get those tertiary aromas, which we love, but of course, other things are happening to wine as it ages. It's oxidizing. So, think about if you sliced an apple in half and you left it out on the counter for, I don't know, an hour. I'm not sure how long this would take. The air is interacting with that clean slice, and what happens? It starts to turn brown, right? It's oxidizing. It's interacting with the air. Now the flesh of the fruit has been exposed to air, and so it's starting to age rapidly. So what's happening to wine as it ages inside the bottle, especially if there's a cork, so we have a bit of air that escapes in and out, we call it egress, and it's just getting a tiny bit of aging going on. Then if we pour it out or we decant it, we're speeding that up. Now, decanting is not a substitute for proper cellar aging. It's like blasting your food in the microwave versus the slow cook in the oven. And that's probably not scientifically based at all. But I'm just trying to draw out some analogies to help you understand the aging process. We want things to come together slowly and properly, and we want to catch that peak of perfection, of hedonistic satisfaction in wine before it starts to decline. So wines that can age follow a trajectory, and they're all different depending on the wine, the region, the vintage, and a whole bunch of other factors which we can discuss tonight. So what Patty is talking about is that a friend of theirs brings a wine that's 50 years old. Okay, that could be good news or bad news, I guess, depending on the friend and his or her budget and taste. So, but wines will rise to a peak of perfection if they are able to age, and then they will start to decline, just like that apple that's out on the counter. Not that we're trying to age our apples, but things will happen to the wine as it ages. We'll get those tertiary aromas, and then it will start to go downhill. We call that past peak, right? So it's starting to turn in color. So that purple or those ruby hints, those beautiful hues in the glass will turn to brick and brown. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but some things will start to change, like aromas and flavors, and they'll start to deteriorate and taste oxidized or like dried out fruit. Or sometimes I think of it as, again, like people, James, what's left is all bones and no flesh, right? And that can be completely enjoyable in a wine. The flesh has faded. This is feeling metaphysical. The flesh has faded, and all that's left is the skeletal structure of the wine. So you're getting the tannins, the structure, but not that fleshy, ripe, big, plummy fruit anymore. That's gone. That's the flesh of the wine. It's gone. It's no more. Nevermore. Oh, the raven. Okay, so Francois is drinking Nota Panero. Francois, please tell us more about that wine, because you know what? I've never tried it. Sounds Italian, to be cliche, but tell us about it, and tell us about the 2007 vintage, please. Dave is drinking. Dave, are you drinking a 50-year-old yellowtail, or are you just being a bit facetious? There is no 50-year yellowtail, ya kidder. Oh, Lise, loving all those terms. Good. P.S. I'm a chemist. Excellent. Lise is a chemist. Better living through chemistry, Lise. So all this science stuff really excites me. It does to me too, right? In a different way, because I'm an artsy. So I try to get my chemistry game on by talking long chain polymers and agglomeration as if I know, but I don't. Only when it comes to wine, a little bit. So sometimes I try rather young wine, Lee says, and have all sorts of flavors hitting you and a nice finish. Yep. And then sometimes older wines give me that too. So I guess I need to keep listening and find out why. Good girl. All right. Dave Laughing Stock. That's a comment, not a wine, right? So I'm drinking, let me just segue to this so I have an excuse to take a sip of it. I am drinking, let me show the bottle, Mercury, which is, not Mercury from Burgundy, France. So this is a Pinot Noir. So all red grapes in Burgundy, France are Pinot Noir. And they have long ageability. And yet, perversely or delightfully, these are light-bodied wines that go the distance. So you don't always need big heft, big alcohol, big tannin, everything else for ageability. Let me just confirm my thesis. So true. Yeah, once again, it's come home to me through scientific investigation. So there's a lot of myths about aging wine that, light-bodied wines can't age. Yes, they can. Burgundy is famous for it. Pinot Noir is a light-bodied red grape. But what enables it to age primarily is acidity. Acid is our friend. Repeat after me. Acid is my friend. Acidity in wine, like food, is a preservative. It gives longevity. It also gives highlight and flavor, and it awakens the taste buds. When you drink something that's acidic, the juices literally start activating in your palate. Malcolm, acid is my friend. But it's one of the things that allows wines to age. And let me just, for comparison, let me choose something here. And I'm not going to be mean to this wine, but here's Cupcake from California, which is sweet, so it has residual sugar. Sugar is a preservative, but not necessarily in this case. I'm talking about dessert wines that have balanced acidity and sugar. This has a lot of sugar. The flavors are sweet, and there's not a lot of acidity. It's very pleasing to the Coca-Cola palate. Those youngins, no, we can't generalize about millennials either, right? Because they're going to take over, they already have taken over the world. But here's the thing. There is a chasm of difference between these two wines. This shows acid and only a touch of little tiny berry sweetness. This is all about cupcakes and chocolate icing. And this is meant to be consumed 17 minutes after driving home. It's a 2013. There is nothing wrong with that. You got your meat lovers pizza, you got your cupcake, and Dave says you've got your shaptalization. Now, Lise, here's a word for you. Shaptalization. That means adding sugar. And why do we add sugar? because it adds sweetness, it adds, let me just go back to Lise before she disappears. I can only see 5 comments at once. So Lise is saying, like lemons in salad dressing. Yes, the acidity. Right, Lise. And then think of lemons in lemonade. If you had lemonade with no sugar, it would just be puckeringly sour, because acidity is sour, right? If you had lemonade with no lemons and just the sugar, it would be cupcake. No, it would not be. So good point. Back to Dave's comment about chaptalization. So that's adding sugar to the process of winemaking at certain points. In some regions it's illegal, mostly in France and other traditional winemaking regions, but in the New World countries, and those are loosely defined as North America, South Africa, those that haven't had a long winemaking tradition, chaptalization can be legal. So anyway, so you get that residual sugar or added sugar. Lee says, I buy cupcake wines for my 20-ish friends who can't handle a nice Pinot Noir. That's good strategy, Lise. We call that a decoy wine. Put it right out in front because they're going to take what's immediately in front of them. And then you're going to drink the Pinot Noir or the Ravenswood Zinfandel. Patty, was the vintage on the cupcake Thursday? Okay, I don't want to lead a mean Facebook session on cupcake. But yeah, it could have been Patty. Anyway, this Dave, I think it was Tuesday. Okay, so this is 2013. Anyway, you know what? It gives pleasure, and that's what counts, right? Okay, so, but back to our point, our discussion. So, ageability, I think a really important part of ageability is acidity, and I am an acid freak. I love acid. I guess, it's what makes my palate come alive. It keeps me from satiating out, from getting tired of a wine, a fruit bomb, a wine just that's, and the other thing, of course, with Burgundy is that it often has low alcohol. This is 12.5. Love that, 12.5%. So lowish alcohol for these days. But yet you get all the pure hedonism of all the flavors and aromas. Francois has said, Notaire Panero is the name of the original farm on which the Torino family began making wine. It's 100% Negro Amaro grapes from a single plot of 25 hectares with an average vine age of 30 years and an altitude of 100 meters above sea level. The soils are shallow and rocky and iron rich. Man, Francois, you know your stuff. Here again, the influence of the Ionian Adriatic seas, holy smokes, adds very specific saline, salty qualities to the grapes. We are in the region of Puglia, Italy, so down south, right? I think near Sicily, but not quite. The grapes are picked quickly over the course of 3 hours. Holy smokes, that sounds stressy. And are brought into the winery where they are destemmed, crushed, and transferred into stainless steel vats with temperature control. In the glass, the wine is fine ruby red color and robust bouquet. The palate is full-bodied and elegant. Oh my goodness. Francois, we need to have dinner at your restaurant next time for this whole team. Forget this online stuff. And I'm just going to post some links about some articles and stuff about aging wine while we're here. What would I eat with the mercury? Lise asks. I would not eat anything, Lise. I would have just more mercury and more mercury. And she says, a nice spicy sausage with some grease. Yes, some grease, please. Yes, I guess. I just wouldn't overwhelm this, Lise. Not to sound precious, but I just wouldn't have anything really strong. So sausage to me says Ravenswood Zinfandel, and grease says something with high acid. So yeah, so maybe this. But you know what I would do? I would have something soft and let the wine really lead the meal. Like veal, or maybe ossobuco, or I don't know. I'd like some more suggestions. Let's crowdsource it. Okay, so if you're just joining us here tonight, this time goes so quickly. I just can't believe we've already been half an hour. Tell us where you're logging in from. You can lurk if you want to, but just say hello, what's in your glass. We're talking about wine and time, even though this is a compass. Chris, he's joining a bit late. Sorry, no need to apologize. No one apologizes here, Chris. He's having some Gamay Noir from Grange of Prince Edward County. Isn't that lovely? I don't think Gamay Noir ages well, even though that's a great wine. So let's talk about why in Burgundy with Pinot Noir, and still in Burgundy, just to the south, is Beaujolais, and the grape is Gamay. Now he's got Gamay Noir, which is a bit of a clonal derivation, but why do we have these long-lived wines in the north of Burgundy with Pinot Noir, and then we've got wines that don't age as much? So I should separate the myth from the fact first. So down in Beaujolais, which is the southern part of Burgundy, we've got Beaujolais Nouveau, which should be consumed from, really just the same vintage. That's a harbinger of the vintage, comes out the third Thursday of every November. Hey, that should be one of our, let's do it. Another Sunday Sipper Club topic. Excuse me, even if you don't like them, you can, you don't have to drink those things, but let's talk about that third Thursday. Now, before she goes, Sharon has a comment. Lee, sorry for the delay. I was putting away groceries and feeding cats. I love this whole entry into domestic lives here. I picked up the Ravenswood for dinner tonight because it was an old Vine Zinfandel fit with this week's theme. Yes, Sharon, on trend. Natalie, can you speak to this? If California is New World, how do they have old vines? Hey, isn't that a clever question? As for the wine, it's smooth but lacks complexity and depth, in Sharon's opinion, which is just as valid as anybody else. Good sipper wine. P.S. I'm a millennial, and I don't drink cupcake or apothic. Point taken, Sharon. Okay, so I'm going to get back to that point, but I'm going to address Sharon's comment before it disappears off the screen. So, regions like California and others, Canada, the US, South Africa, New Zealand, Australia, you can throw out some others here on this comment section, are all regarded as New World. New World doesn't mean necessarily that they don't have a long history of producing wine, but that they're, how do I put it, that they're not at the forefront of winemaking. How do I do this? I'm not just trying to be diplomatic. So let's just take Canada. Canada and a lot of the cool northern hemisphere countries have a tradition of beer and whiskey. That's what we made, that's how we kept warm, that was our alcoholic beverage of choice. Same with the United States, right? Jefferson said, no nation is drunk where wine is cheap. What he meant is, colonials, get off your craze for rum, let's start drinking wine like the civilized French, and we won't have so many problems with you rowdy types. So it's more about a culture of wine, a tradition of fine winemaking, or at least the striving toward it. Chile, Argentina, yes, Malcolm, are also New World. So if we define it like that, because you can trace roots back, like in South Africa and even California, back to the 1800s, and sometimes further back. That's where the old vines were planted, Sharon. But we still call this New World. As you know, a lot of New World countries, or at least North American, were disrupted by Prohibition. A lot of things were ripped up and replanted. Obviously these old vines were not. But we still regard these as New World countries, even though they have the old vines. So the old vines are traditionally, you define, definition of old vines. Anybody jump in here? But really, I'm thinking 30 years or older is what I've been told when I've been into Australia, like Henschke, Hill of Grace. Oh my gosh. Ravenswood, some Zins. Marta says, hello Marta, New World wines don't have to have don't have the history and experience of making wine, yes, as the Old World countries do, yes. It's a mix of things, isn't it? So even though we can have vines in California that are more than 100 years old, but at least more than 30 years old, we're still talking about a New World country. Because often when we talk about France and Italy, these are Old World countries. Italy, France, Spain, Portugal. We're talking about making wines forever. Like each of them will differ, but we're talking like the 1500s and the 1600s, and like if I look at one of the wines I have tonight for you, Massey. We were talking about this the other night. It goes back to these are the ancestors of the father of Italian literature, Dante Alighieri. He wrote the Inferno. We're talking about 1500s, 1400s, 1300s sometimes, as to when wines were first produced, and that aspiration toward fine wines and producing and experimenting and looking at vine roots. And that's why we get all of the laws in France and Italy. They have so much regulation because it's a history of knowing, of experimenting, and it can handcuff them, but it also says we know, we've tried, we've experimented. This is what we think represents our terroir, to use another technical term, Lise, and represents that mixture of climate, soil, and other factors we call terroir in this region specifically. So this is a really hard thing to define, as you can see. But Sharon, I hope this is giving you a better feel for why old vines can be in California, and yet California and other regions are still called New World regions. Okay, so Chris, good to know that Gamay doesn't age well. Glad I'm drinking it now. Yes, Chris, do not save it till tomorrow. It will not age. So back to the Burgundy again, just checking the thesis. Chris, what are the best whites to age? Glad you asked that, Chris. What whites don't age well? Sorry if you covered this already. No, we didn't. So good question, Chris. So some of the similar factors, those ingredients, if you will, that make reds age well, also make whites age well. Acidity, again, acidity is our friend. So let me get some things here. I've got two whites I want to show you. First of all, German Riesling, poor German Riesling. Its reputation got tarnished back in the 70s or 80s. Sharon and others will not know because they weren't even dreamt of as people back then. But so Riesling is a beautiful, beautiful wine. We do it well in Canada. They do it well in Washington State. But really the benchmark is Germany. So Riesling has natural acidity. It thrives in cool climates. Cool climate, less sun, less ripening of the grapes, less sugar, less conversion into alcohol after fermentation. So you're going to preserve a lot of fresh acidity. Now, this is Riesling Spätlese. Sorry if I spit there. So there are degrees of sweetness in Riesling, and they're roughly correlated to when the grapes are picked in the harvest. So you start off with, well, there are dry Rieslings, completely dry Rieslings in Germany, and then they start off with Cabernet, Spätlese, Auslese, Trockenbeeren, Auslese. I love that I can say all those words. Anyway, they get progressively sweeter because the grapes were picked later in the season. Chris is saying he loves the petrol characteristics of an aged Riesling. Yes. So what happens with Rieslings, especially fine Rieslings like this, is they take on this. Everybody thinks, if you're new to this adjective, petrol, I don't want outboard motor in my wine, but yes, you do. Think of it as whetstone. Think of it as you're running through a brook or in a forest, and there's about yonder babbling brook, and you pick up a stone, and it's got the fresh spring rain on it, and you smell that wet stone, that's part of it. And then summer, you're at the cottage and they're revving the outboard motor, but it's that smell. I don't know, it's, some people call it minerality, petrol, whetstone, flint, but it's attractive, it's not bad. So you gotta taste and smell to experience and to know what I'm talking about, because words do fail often when it's coming to describing this stuff. So anyway, Riesling from Germany is an ageable white, an extremely ageable white, Chris. This one, I am loving this wine. Torres, great producer, well known. Torres has wineries in different countries. This one is from Spain, Catalonia, and it is a blend, I believe, of like Muscatel, Gewürztraminer, all the aromatic grapes. Riesling is probably in here. The type is too small for me to read right now, but it's a gorgeous, gorgeous wine. It's like $14. It's out in the LCBO now, but it's widely available like around the world, wherever you are. And it is just so beautiful. It will age. Now, you don't have to age it. You can enjoy it now. That's the thing about some ageable wines. It doesn't mean you have to wait, for years before you can dare to open them. Some wines age and have fairly immediate drinkability, enjoyability. They're not so, they're not big tannic monsters. This I would put with Asian, mild curries, medium curries, that sort of thing. So, Chris, so we talked about whites, which whites age well. So those with acidity, like German Rieslings. Your aromatic grapes will often age well. Gewürztraminer, Riesling, what else is in there? Viognier, Condrieu, the northern region of the Rhone Valley of France. You gotta find some of that, Condrieu. But also whites with some sweetness. So we're not talking about our, cupcakey wines in the Chardonnay version. We're talking about dessert wines that have sweetness balanced with acidity. So your Sauterne from Bordeaux, the epitome of that is Château Yquem. Ages for decades, decades and decades. So it's that balance of sugar and acid, and really that is what helps wines and people, back to you, James, age. If all the elements are in balance, so we don't have something dominating like just the sugars or just the acid or just the tannin. All of those elements are coming together and they're knitting together for something that's more complex than it was in its youth, but they're moving in lockstep. The acid, the tannin, the sugar, everything is going ta-da, ta-da, together, right? So what you get with a Bordeaux Sauterne, which is a region in Bordeaux, and it's usually a Sauvignon Blanc blend, and let's talk about Sauvignon Blanc in a moment, but it's botrytized, bringing out the tech terms because there's a lot of people who love those. Lise, before your comment disappears, your favorite Riesling to date is Steel Post from 30 Bench in Niagara. Yes. Diesel aroma. Yes. Lise, I was in a wine tasting class, one of my first ones, and we were tasting Riesling, and someone said, this tastes like the Dallas airport, Dallas, Texas. And my wine teacher, Vic Harradine, here in Ottawa, loved that description. It was the petrol, it was the diesel from the jet fumes. So right on. Chris says, love the petrol characteristic. Yes, absolutely. And Patty says, we've had some with the diesel fuel flavor. Marta says, what is the name of the Torres? It's called, let me just put this up here, Vina Esmeralda. It's one of my most favorite, Marta. And it's $14 in the LCBO, but also available elsewhere. It's on my website. I've reviewed it. The 2015 vintage. So good. So pretty. So exotic. You gotta try it with Asian curries, anything, or just on its own. So we were talking about things aging in lockstep. So if all the elements are aging in lockstep, then you have a balance. That's what we mean by balance, by the way, all those elements. But also, that is why a wine can age. So something doesn't something doesn't outpace, one element doesn't outpace another. So again, to make a metaphor that's probably not going to work, but you get those little geniuses, those 10-year-old geniuses that end up at university, and they are so smart, but socially they are so awkward. So yes, they're so smart, but I don't know if that's a prescription for lifelong balance and happiness. Who knows? Maybe they are. But with wine, it's the same thing. You don't want one thing to be developing out of whack with all the rest. You want everything to develop together. Lise says, for some reason I don't see people's comments. Okay, not sure what's happening, Lise. Facebook Live has been a pretty challenging technical thing for me, and I don't always know what's going on. All I know is I can see 5 comments at a time and they disappear, but then on the video replay, because there will be a video replay, you'll be able to see everybody's comments. So I hope that helps. Tom, it's just you, Lise. Okay, I think that's sort of supportive tone. Anyway, let's talk about some other things, because I had this host of wines, but back to the Burgundy, just checking. If you're just joining us, please say hello, even just where you're logging in from and what are you drinking. Have you clicked share and like and everything else, that I told you to do at the beginning? Because, oh my gosh, it's 46 minutes. Okay, so a little bit of wine. And then I'm just going to run through some other things here so that we can wrap it up. So, what's really interesting, champagne, sparkling wine. Let's talk about aging champagne. So, I have Veuve Clicquot Rosé, Veuve Clicquot 2008. This is vintage dated, not rosé. Non-vintage dated. Of course, they do a non-vintage dated, non-rosé. Very interesting, the way champagne ages. Polarizing. A lot of people love their vintage champagne, which takes on a nuttier flavor. So that's what happens with champagne. So when champagne does not have a vintage date on it, you're not going to get any more mileage taste-wise out of it by aging it. It probably won't go rapidly downhill because it's got acidity, it's got bubbles, the effervescence going to help preserve it all. But it's not going to get more complex. It's really meant to be consumed when you buy it or a year or two later without a lot of improvement. But the vintage champagne, let me show you one other treat here. Vintage champagne. Bollinger, RD 1996. That means recently disgorged. 1996. That's when they took, so champagnes are temporarily capped with almost like a beer cap when they're made. They're stored upside down. I'm not doing it to this baby. And so that the sediment will naturally fall to the neck of the bottle as it's upside down, and then they disgorge it. They, under cold water conditions, they uncap it, take that little plug of yeast that has settled in the neck, and then put on that big mushroom cap cork, right? And then seal her up. This is 1996. This is 16 years in the making, and I just can't wait to try this. Because, not just because it was James Bond champagne before product placement became popular, but because I want to really taste what 20-year-old champagne that was meant to age tastes like. I have tasted it before, not this wine, but others, and it's an experience. It's an acquired taste. I think the Brits really lead with this. The British people, they have that taste for fine port, but also aged champagne. Definitely an acquired taste. And I wonder if anybody's acquired it. Bond, James Bond. Okay, so that's champagne. Let's talk about port. We need to talk about port. So we've got different types of port. We have got your vintage port. So this is straight up vintage port, 1980. This vintage port, especially from a good year like 1980, is not going to be drinking well for a couple of decades. This one is ready, of course, but it's meant to be aged. if you drink vintage port too young, your tongue will not have a good experience. It just tastes too tannic, all the elements are out of balance, like someone crocheted the wrong sweater with 3 arms. It just doesn't work. It's just weird. Lee says that bubbly deserves some of your mum's pearls on that night. Yes. Chris, I'm saving a great port from Carlo Estates for Christmas dinner. Oh, yay. That's a good topic, Chris. What are we having for Christmas dinner? We're lining up our topics. So, vintage port, the one that ages longest. 3 or 4 vintages out of 10, I believe, are declared vintage years for port. So, they don't always have a vintage year on the label. You'll find if you go back and you're a real port nut, you will know which years were good years, and those are the years in which vintage dated port was made. So the next thing we have is, well, there is late bottled vintage port, which will have a date on it, but it's meant to be consumed early. I know this is so confusing if you're just new to this stuff, but late bottled vintage port, the way it's made is it's made to be drinking early. LBV, late bottled vintage port, will have a year on it, but doesn't have that aging potential. You don't have to wait. Production methods really influence the fact that it can drink early. The other thing that's vintage dated is Cojita port. Cojita, single vineyard port. It will have a vintage, and it is going to taste a whole lot like tawny port that's not vintage dated. I'm going to confuse the heck out of everyone as we do this wrap up here, but just want to put it out there for you. I think when you hear about these things in layers, like several times over, it starts to sink in. When you taste things, when you visit the region, it all starts to make sense. But someone has to tell you a number of times, and that's what I'm here to do. So tawny port can be 10-year-old, 20-year-old, 30-year-old. It's a blend of multiple vintages, so you're never going to see a vintage on tawny port. This one you will. They both have what I call a tawny character, so toffee, caramel, toasted almond, versus vintage port, what I just had here for a moment here, is more black fruit, black forest cake, darker, deeper, more Heathcliff, more Catherine on the Heath. So the other one that can age well, of course, is sherry, which we were talking about last week in our Halloween special, cask of the Amontillado. Sherry is a fractional blending system, so there's multiple barrels all stacked, usually in a little triangle, and called a Solera, and you're always siphoning off, the winemaker is siphoning off fractional bits of one barrel into another. So you're blending multiple years. You're not going to see a vintage on a sherry. But sherry is also a fortified wine like port. So it's got the extra sugar, the extra alcohol because of the way it's made. Therefore, it's got the legs for a long life. So, my peeps, now, let's see. Let me refresh here. Do you have any outstanding comments? This has been fun, but someone has to eat supper soon. This is great. I learn a lot. I'm liking it. So what else? I'm not seeing any other comments, but as always, I will go back into these comments after our session has done, and I will still answer questions if you have questions after the fact, or if you're watching the video replay of this on Facebook. So please, before you wrap up tonight, click on the little like button, click on the share button, click on the sign up, follow, and then you'll know when we go live in the future. Your friends will know. This table, this party will get bigger. I look forward to it every Sunday night. So put it into your calendar, if you have a Google Calendar or whatever. Every Sunday at 6 p.m. Eastern, we're here with the Sunday Sipper Club. So thank you very much for taking the time and inviting me into your space tonight. I hope you've enjoyed it, and I look forward to seeing you next week. Please suggest some topics. Some things have come out for future sessions. What should we talk about next week? You let me know. All right? You take care.